Okay guys, so today I'm going to demonstrate just a basic setup for creating our bridge, actually building it and constructing it now that we're done our final sketch. I'm going to show you a couple different places in the classroom and then we will kind of actually get into it. So to begin, in your assigned numbered area, whether it's a locker or a drawer or a shelf, you should find a board that looks similar to this. It'll have your class number on it. It should also have 8 pins. They're little red pins that should be pressed into the foam core board. If you don't have 8, just make sure you let myself or the instructor know that you need more. You will need your design. Also located at an instructional table, you should find the following. You're going to need your numbered glue bottle. So I'm number 30, so I'm going to take number 30. You are going to need a pencil, so I have my pencil here. In the tool cabinet area in the back, you should find a sanding block. You're going to need a piece of wax paper if your board didn't have a nice one on it, so you'll need to take a pre-cut piece of wax paper. You're also going to need a cutting piece of cardstock, and they might be a little rough. You're going to need a cutting device. So if you do not feel comfortable using an X-Acto knife, these are pre-numbered, so you'll need to find your number. You might find a various style. You might find a white style also. Make sure it has your number on the bottom, and it might also be on the side. If you don't feel comfortable using a X-Acto knife, just ask for a balsa stick cutter. That's also an option. All right, the last couple things you're going to need to actually get started are the pieces of wood. Now, as a reminder, we have 2 different styles of wood. We have basswood that's going to be used on the bottom of your bridge. Remember, it's a thicker, denser piece of wood, so this is used on the bottom of the side view. And then you need 6 pieces of the pre-cut balsa, so you want to make sure that you count 6. And all of this you will need to make sure you take to your workstation. So I'm going to have this all laid out. Now with the wax paper, we're going to take 4 small pieces of masking tape and tape them to the corners so everything is set. And then once we have all this, oh, I forgot one thing. The other thing that you're going to make sure you need to have is a wet paper towel. Because as we use the glue bottles, if you have excess glue get on your paper or wood, or you have excess glue come out of the glue bottle, you'll need that. So you also need a wet paper towel. So I'm going to get my corners of the wax paper taped down, and then I'll be right back to demonstrate how we start building. Okay, so when we're ready to begin building, we are going to take our basswood and our pencil and line up the basswood right in line with the bottom of our bridge. I'm going to put a pencil mark. You're also going to put your name and homeroom. Now remember, we have 2 sides to our bridge, our truss that we're going to be making, so you need to have 2 of these. So I suggest you line them up and get your name on them right away. And then we're actually going to cut this over at the side table on the vise with a small back saw, because our X-Acto knife blade will not cut through the basswood, nor will our balsa stick cutter. So we're going to have to use the back saw with a tiny block to hold it in place at the vise. So let's take a break and go see that now. Okay, so for this step, here's our sanding block which is in the vise. This is the back saw that we're going to be using. And you just want to make sure you hold on to the wood with one hand and get it lined up with the other. So I want to make sure I'm right on that line. And then I'm going to saw back and forth. It doesn't take long to get through it. And then you do this with your other piece. That way you have this one already prepped and ready for the next side. So we get it in there and lined up, cut, done, and we're good to go. Okay. So now that we have our pieces cut, we are going to be anchoring them down with our pins. So you begin with your piece of bass on the, sorry, I was trying to find my name there. There we go. Put a piece of bass on the bottom. We're gonna line it right up. And we're gonna take our pins, and you're not putting the pins in the wood, you're actually putting them on either side of the wood, and they kind of are going in at an angle into the wood. That way it's clamping it down so that it doesn't move. Okay, now for cutting with our balsa wood, We're gonna line our balsa wood up with the top piece. We're building the outside frame and then we work to the inside. Now for cutting with the balsa wood, you have two options. You can use the stick cutter. If you decide to use the stick cutter, you place the wood inside and get it lined up. There's a tiny little mark right where it cuts, and you press down and it'll cut it perfectly. So that's demonstrating with the stick cutter. I'll show the X-Acto knife here in a second. So you line that up, and the top view also, the top piece of wood also gets clamped down with the pins. So the top and the bottom are going to be held in place with the pins. Now we've talked about joints in class, and remember, right here on these edges where we've got those angles, those are miter joints. So when you go to cut these pieces, you have to make sure that you're going to cut on an angle. So you have to draw your line at an angle. Now cutting with the X-Acto knife, you are going to make sure you hold the knife at an angle, and it's not a saw. You're just going to put it on the cutting board and rock back and forth down as much as you can until it slices apart. And you do that in both locations that you need to make a cut. Now if it doesn't come out perfectly clean, which sometimes it doesn't, the balsa wood doesn't always cooperate depending on the grain, that's when we use the sanding block. And you can sand those angles even more until you get them exactly the way that they should look. And that fits in there perfectly. Now the good news is I have a piece right here that I just cut. So it should already be kind of the right size, because remember we drew this symmetrically. So a lot of times you can just hold the wood and line it up and it's gonna give you the exact same piece on the opposite side. So if you've got one piece, you should have one that fits exactly. And if it doesn't fit perfectly, I can make some corrections, but nope, it does. Okay, so next what I'm gonna do is with my glue, remember, we're not gluing this to the wax paper, we're gluing it to the actual wood. So you're gonna take a little dab of glue on the ends, just a small dot on both ends, and you're going to press it into the bottom and the top piece. And you do this on both sides. Once you are done the two sides, then we move into doing any pieces that are straight or vertical, up and down. So I'm gonna take my piece and I'm gonna start lining these up. Now I'm gonna stop talking and I'm gonna put this into fast forward mode so you can see what happens. I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, so now the next piece that I'm gonna work on are my two angles that I have in here. So I'm coming back to this piece, and I still had a miter cut on the other side. I was using the flat side for those straight pieces because I knew I already had a miter cut there. So we'll see if this fits in here at all. It might not. And oh, nope, it does. So I saved myself a little bit of work there. So I need to get an angle right there. And there's gonna be some scrap left over here that is gonna be probably too small for any of the other pieces that I need. So unfortunately, I probably won't be able to use it, but I'm gonna keep it off to the side. You never wanna throw any pieces of wood out because you never know if you're gonna run out of any. So I never, ever, ever, ever throw any out until the very end. Because again, you never know if you make a mistake, or sometimes you can barter with some other classmates if they didn't get theirs. Or they need some more wood, or you have a piece they need. You can always trade if needed. So my two angles look like they're gonna fit in. Oops, and I'll get those glued in, and I'm gonna let it dry overnight. And tomorrow, or the next little clip, we're gonna talk about adding what's called gussets. So I will get there in just a second, so I'm gonna speed this up again. Okay, so gussets. If you've ever looked in the top of the rafters of trusses in a home that's being in the middle of construction, or if you go up in your attic and you look at your roof joints, Gussets a lot of times are at the peak where the two pieces come together, very similar to right here, and they'll use a big metal plate to hold it together. So if you go back through and you inspect, the first thing you want to do is anywhere you have a joint, add a little dab of glue, and you think you're done. And that's just going to help to reinforce all the joints, and that glue will dry hard, and this is going to make it a little bit better. You can go back and dab it with your finger because you don't want, you know, big glue dots everywhere. And then gusset, basically, with any little pieces of scrap wood that you have, you can actually cut them a little bit and then cut them in half again and put them anywhere that you have any holes or gaps. And when the glue dries, that's just going to reinforce those joints and make it a little bit stronger. And again, that's called a gusset. And I highly suggest you do that, especially if you have any gaps or openings where the wood, maybe the miter joints didn't come in together. So let this dry, and then we'll talk about doing the second side of your truss.